Oh, I didn't start recording.
Oh, it's okay. You want me to repeat it?
Yeah, can you repeat it, please? Thank you.
Yeah. So for the next 5 years, at least, I know we are really ahead in solid state battery technology. Batteries are very, very core technology for any industry, especially in the US, especially for EVs in the US. The biggest issue right now or biggest issue in the industry is that most companies are in a prototype phase. They don't have actual solid state batteries.
Mhm.
However, that being said, we are actually starting to mass produce these things. So we are way ahead of the game here. We are really we're just really ahead of the game here. So I see ourselves as working and I'm currently working with Alpine 4.
Mhm.
I see myself working with them for at least the next several years, especially because we're about to accomplish some pretty big things here.
Mhm.
Um, and I and yeah, and I just really think there's a huge future for batteries. So
Mhm.
I don't see that opportunity ever winding down. I think that's just gonna be a very, very fast paced opportunity that probably once in a lifetime chance to really, capitalize off of for the next couple of
Mhm.
years.
What's like the difference between like a normal battery and a solid state kind of like a battery?
Solid batteries first they improve the energy density by about 30 to 60%,
Mm.
which is a huge. You see Elon Musk going crazy over an 8% increase in energy density. The second biggest improvement is the safety. So we actually shot it with a 308 Magnum 3 times,
Mm.
and it not only did not blow up, but it actually still was functional. Granted, it was still missing
Wow.
a lot of a lot of the battery was missing, so it was losing some capacity and voltage, but still operational. So I mean, we've tested this thing at the Battery Innovation Center in Indianapolis, which is like a third-party nonprofit location started by the U.S. Navy actually for research. But we tested, we shot it, we put a nail through it, we folded it, we even put it in the oven, and it broke a few records or several records at that facility. So it's just an incredibly safe battery.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, it still is a battery, so there's still that small 1% chance that you might blow it up with something.
Mhm.
But we've shot up plenty of them, and none of them have ever had an issue. So
Mhm.
it's just a very, very safe battery. And as you know, batteries are a huge, huge, huge risk and liability.
Mhm. Are you getting government contracts for these batteries? Or like for military use or
We just started mass producing them. We just came off of CES like a week ago, so we're in
uh
talks with a lot of opportunities. We have, so we're very, very. This opportunity for us has only just started a couple of weeks ago, so we're
okay.
very early in the process.
Uh-huh.
I would say just today we spoke with a lot of military personnel about the technology, and they seem very, very excited.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely see there's a huge military application because we had worked with the Marine Expeditionary Force before on giving them a power system
Mhm.
because, as you know, in modern warfare, it's everything is very digitized, which means you're carrying all sorts of electronics.
Yeah.
The average infantryman, about back when I was in ROTC, actually carried about a decade ago. So that they carried about 17 pounds of just batteries to power all their electronic devices. So that's for radios, for drones, for personal devices.
Mhm.
So it's you have a lot of electronics to power. 17 pounds of batteries is going to cause people some serious back issues.
Mhm.
So what we were working with the Marine Expeditionary Force a couple of years ago was giving them a graphene battery, which makes the package a lot much smaller, much more powerful. Um, and you could I mean, there's a huge benefit in making it much smaller, cutting down the weight by about a third.
Mhm.
The issue still was if you shot it, and people are wearing these on their body. If that gets shot, it'll probably blow up. So it still was there were still limitations to the technology back then, and the
Mhm.
military, the U.S. military, still surprisingly is very old fashioned in a lot of ways, with a lot of older technology because they're a little too afraid to move towards newer technologies. So with their older technology, it was a little bit safer. You could kind of puncture a little bit, but I mean, there's probably still a lot of liquid coming out and whatnot.
Mhm.
That being said, with solid state battery technology, this just kind of changes the whole ball game, right? Because now you have a battery where it can be shot through and through,
Mhm.
and it won't catch on fire, or at the very least, I would say it's the chance of catching on fire are nearly reduced to zero.
Mhm.
Of course, there are some ways to still blow it, like to make it catch on fire. Take a torch or something incendiary that could still set something on fire, because like at the end of the day, it's still the battery.
Yeah.
But yeah, that application for the military is huge, and
Mhm.
especially because military wants to move towards EVs.
Yeah.
Um, you don't want to move to EVs if the first thing that happens when that vehicle gets shot at is that it blows up, right? Or like not even just like catch on fire, but like catastrophically blows up, right?
Yeah.
That would just not be good. And then it's not. I mean, and you have all sorts of like acidic like materials everywhere from the battery, and it's not a good place to be when
Mhm.
if it blows up. So we're hoping that this makes a pretty big impact there.
Yeah. Next question. When you encounter a difficult problem and unprecedented pressure in starting a business, how did you deal with them? And what are some of the best ways, like, for young people to deal with these kind of pressures?
Yeah, because so I think especially when you're doing your own startup,
Hmm.
you will probably have to recognize that there will be a lot of obstacles, a lot of very uh hard obstacles to overcome. That's just the nature of doing your own startup, right? It's not None of this is easy. So kind of setting that expectation up, I would say going into this with that expectation, it didn't really ever surprise me how hard something got.
Hmm.
I actually usually felt really motivated, because once I completed that, or whatever it was, or solved that issue, um, it's just another like trophy to add into the cupboard. It's um, and when you start collecting, enough victories, you're bound to get somewhere eventually.
Hmm.
Just knowing that as long as you're working hard and you're working smart at the same time, you have to do a little bit of both. I know some people are like, oh, I don't need to work hard, I work smart. You have to do both. Working hard, analyzing each step you take and how it's been successful, how it's been a failure.
Hmm.
As long as you're doing that, you will eventually become out victorious, because at the end of the day, the US is kind of a land opportunity. There's just no way, if if you're doing if you're doing the core basics, like you're working hard, working smart, and you have value add, there's
Yeah.
no way nobody's not going to recognize that.
Next question. What did you learn from your failures, and how important are like the lessons that you learned, and like how important do you think failures are?
I think failures are very important to have, because it's a learning, it's a learning situation, or it's a learning experience.
Hmm.
I don't ever see failures as a sense where it's like, oh, this happened, the company is just there's no way this company can grow, or there's nowhere we can go anymore.
Hmm.
There's almost always a solution to whatever problem you have. So I always saw the setbacks as learning experiences. If there was one time where we were shipping product over, and we didn't insure them right,
Hmm.
insure it properly. We or the at least the shipping people, the people who were shipping it, the forwarders who we were working with, they were skipping out on a lot of paperwork, and they weren't filing stuff correctly. So when the shipment went missing, which tends to happen especially when you're shipping from China sometimes, um we weren't able to recover our value back from that box. And as a startup, losing about $10,000 worth of goods can really hurt you.
Hmm.
So that, again, that's just a learning experience to let me know that everybody, it's not just me, but everybody that I work with I have to make sure that I'm working with people who have integrity and that filling out are doing each of the steps correctly. They're not cutting corners,
Hmm.
because cutting corners early on is probably going to cause you some pretty big pains later on.
Hmm. How do you measure success?
Ooh, I would say it's all relative to what you personally believe.
Hmm.
Um, everybody's goal in life is a little different. My goal in life may be to make as much money as I can, right? And then
Mhm,
that might be a metric that I measure by, but other people might not measure their lives by that. So
mhm,
I think um, measurements of success is really relative to the person themselves,
mhm,
and I wouldn't judge others based on your own levels of success.
mhm. Are you a risk taker, and how important do you think risk taking is?
Yeah, I love taking risks.
Mhm,
In matter of fact, like my one of my majors was industrial engineering and operations research. So a lot of that was analyzing, going through data and analyzing the risk versus reward.
mhm,
Everything you do, especially in a startup and the entrepreneur space, is a huge risk.
mhm,
And I think you have to kind of be able to identify the probabilities or the expected outcomes, or the expected values of the returns, and make those decisions, because there are some times where, for me personally, for risk, I'm willing to take a 50% to 60% chance. But then there are some people who love to, what I call, gamble, and
mhm,
those are like, less than 10% chance of success. And again, like the expected value of return may actually still net positive. So it's sometimes just kind of like, um you have to kind of do your own analysis. And having a statistical background, I felt like I was able to, that gave me a lot of tools to really look at a problem and analyze what decisions we should make.
mhm,
So that being said, I am a risk taker. I love taking risks because, again, for me, a failure is a learning experience,
mhm,
and I feel like each of those failures uh, have actually, I have contributed to my success.
mhm.
So when, with that kind of mindset in mind, um, I I would say I would take on a lot of risk. Not all the risk, again, not all the risk in the world. I wouldn't, again, I don't like gambling, but I do like taking calculated risks.
Mhm.
And I think it's very important to be comfortable to do so. Because
Yeah.
if you're not taking risks, you're not growing as a person.
Mhm. So how do you navigate through like a small project, let's say a small business with like a very small budget?
How do I navigate? So that's
Yeah.
a pretty multifaceted. So I mean, like, how do you start it, or like,
Yeah, yeah. How do you start something like a small budget, like a project? What are some of the
yes.
ways?
So of course, where do you get your funding?
Mhm,
Families and friends is, I was an accelerator too, and this is what they were teaching, but families and friends are a really good places to just bootstrap.
mhm,
Even from yourself, if you, like, let's say if you work in the Bay Area or work somewhere else, like, or wherever, after you graduate, you
mhm,
just work there for a year or two, save up enough money,
mhm.
and then just kind of like, once you have enough money, just kind of do it yourself. So getting funding like that, um I think that's probably one of the first and easier steps.
Mhm.
I know it's, for a lot of people, that might even seem like it's hard, um, but it's unfortunately one of the easier steps. Um, and From there, I think what you want to do is really be tactical, or tactical about where you are placing every single dollar, because you may only have $20,000 or $40,000, and that's, at the end of the day, that's not a lot to work with.
Mhm.
Um, so you really have to make sure that you're also diversifying too. Um, so it's kind of like in investing, right? If you're diversifying into many different funds or stocks or whatever, one goes bad, not the end of the world. You still have a couple others to, keep you alive.
Mhm.
And that's what I did with our strategies. So I divvied up. So most of that money did go to buying product,
Mhm.
but in terms of our, I would say, our outreach, the money we've allocated to outreach, we had to mix in SEO, Amazon advertisement, YouTube engagement, advertisement engagements, PR engagements, Facebook social media engagements too. So it's a mix of a bunch of things, and kind of diversifying between all of those. And it seems like a lot, and it is, and it seems like you're not going to be able to really push in all of them, but
Mhm.
you can kind of gauge how well each of those have worked,
Mhm.
and then as time goes on, you can kind of figure out which of those were doing well,
Hmm.
and then minimizing the ones that you don't think are doing as well, and pushing on the ones that you think you do. Also being able to recognize that sometimes maybe you didn't put enough in that certain category. So like for YouTuber outreach, right? If you're paying a guy like $1,000 to make a video on you, that chances are that guy's videos only reaching a couple that tens of thousands of people.
Hmm.
And YouTube videos, especially for something that's clickbaity, not clickbaity, but like interesting or attention grabbing as like battery technology, that might only multiply his views by 10 times or so.
Hmm.
But if you spend that extra $5,000 and you get somebody who's in around the 100,000 viewer range, then his videos end up being about a million views or so. And that's actually a real life case. So,
Hmm.
but at the same time, some of the times we made the videos with some really popular guys end up not doing as well. So
Hmm.
it's kind of hit or miss. But kind of be able to again, able to analyze, identify your which one is the best on return. You don't have to calculate to the down to the dollar. I'm
Hmm.
just saying being able to look at it and being able to identify, oh well, this source brought us a lot of traffic to our website, but it didn't convert to a lot of sales.
Hmm.
This site was able to bring in probably only a tenth of the amount of traffic, but a similar amount of sales, but it ended up being cheaper, right?
Hmm.
Well, there's value in both, right? Because generating traffic, but not sales, is also still good.
Hmm.
And again, obviously generating sales is also good too. So um, there's always going to be pros and cons to analyze, which ones you need because you need both.
Hmm.
The truth is you need both. Because those people who don't end up buying, maybe they still will talk about the product. That's still people talking on social media, and that kind of starts a fire.
Hmm.
So I know there's a lot of things. So I know I kind of covered a lot in that short span, but that's generally how I would recommend doing it.
Yeah, some great information. What personality traits do you think a business leader should possess?
Oh, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, what personality traits do you think a business leader should possess?
I think they should be extroverts and they should I have a little sticker in my truck, but it's like a sticker that says radiate positivity.
Hmm.
I think that's very, very true because a leader is because if you're starting your own company, you have to be a leader and you have to be able to inspire people and others and your customers even
Hmm.
to believe in you. You're not necessarily just selling a product, you're selling yourself.
Hmm.
You're selling yourself as a brand. And that is so true because since I've started, I've gone through three different companies, Real Graphene, Electron, and now we're in Alpine.
Hmm.
But a lot of people recognize the work because they follow me personally. Not on social media. I don't really like have a page or anything to follow, but as in like they will, like they'll look up interviews that I've had and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And I think keeping that and then kind of thinking from that way as opposed to they're looking at it as a company is one of many ways, to develop a company. So again, you as a person should
Hmm.
radiate positivity and inspire others and not just people within your own company but everyone around you over the internet, like people watch your interview, they have to feel inspired by what you have to say.
Hmm. What is your philosophy of life? And what do you and yeah, what is your philosophy of life?
That's saying I go with the flow. I started my business just selling power banks.
Hmm.
But from there I was able to network with some really amazing people in China.
Hmm.
Wade, my business partner, he's been an incredible person to work with. Um, but so I never, and then we ended up making, super fast charging batteries, and then now we're making solid state batteries, and it's just, and then never in a million years would I have expected starting my business startup back in the day to really, uh, realize where we are now. This is where we're at is completely different from what I thought we were going to be.
Hmm.
So but again, being able to be adaptive with the situation, being able to identify opportunities and take advantage of them, um is I think the most important thing. Like Bruce Lee, it's
Hmm.
there's a saying, or he I don't know the exact quote, but he talks about being like water, right?
Hmm.
um water is able to kind of take any shape or form,
Hmm.
but at the same time, it can also be very hard. Like if you were to strike water, sometimes it can hurt.
Yeah.
So knowing when to become part of the mold and how to take advantage of the situation is, I think, the most important thing for me personally.
Hmm. So as a Chinese, how do you view the cultural differences between the East and the West? And how did you integrate the Eastern and Western cultures?
Yeah, I think people I think Eastern and Western cultures can mix a lot more than people think. I know Western
Mhm,
cultures tend to be more relaxed, a lot more open.
mhm,
Eastern cultures tend to be a lot more focused on hard work.
mhm,
I think, but I think there's a lot of crossover or synergies there. You know, um, what I what I really like about at least of course, for in Eastern culture, from when we were young, we're always trained to practice, to have the discipline to practice something very hard if we want to be good at it.
mhm,
um and I think that sort of dedication and perseverance really builds character,
mhm,
which I think is very, very important. Now, in terms of, I think, a later developmental stage, I think I actually believe in a lot more in Western philosophies or modern. I won't say it's not just Western, but it's it is present in Eastern, but in general um um to be a lot more how do I say it? Not just innovative, but like to be a lot more, how do I say the term? I'll just use the term innovative, which is not entirely true because
mhm.
obviously in Asia there's plenty of innovative engineers, but
Yeah.
basically being able uh, uh to take on many different shoes and take on many different roles and
Mhm,
to kind of be a much more well-rounded person.
mhm.
I think that's also very, very important to incorporate too. Um, so I think there's a little bit of both that each side can really like you can take from each side to really develop your character.
Mhm. Yeah, like from a personal experience, like I feel like a lot of like Asian kids are like, how do I say this? Like they're only good like one thing, and then like when you go outside and like talk to and like socialize people, like I feel like they're just stuck there, you know? It's
Yeah,
like,
and it's kind of like reflective on the education system because if you go to
yeah,
K to 12 in China, China has a very strong K to 12 uh uh pipeline, whereas US has a little bit better of a university pipeline, right?
mm,
Um I guess that's how general people put it. I wouldn't say that's entirely true, but in generalizing, that's how you could kind of think about it. Um and the thing is, like, I went to UC Berkeley, I saw a ton of Chinese kids in my class, and a lot of them did eventually adapt into being much more well-rounded people,
mhm,
especially coming out of I think there is a lot of value of being an expert at one thing and
mhm,
knowing what it's like to be an expert at one thing. But I think and I think on most, this could also be applicable in some cases, but sometimes it may be beneficial to just really focus and dial in at one thing if you're good at it. But
mhm,
for me personally, I've liked to um say, hey, I've done this, I'm really good at that, but I really want to move on to the next thing and learn the next new thing,
mhm.
and get good at that too, if that makes sense. So
Yeah,
I think there's definitely value for both. There's plenty of people who are successful at being specialists,
yeah,
especially like my partner Wade. He's a pretty well-rounded person generally, but he is an incredible specialist in the battery technology field.
mhm,
If it weren't for people like him, I couldn't do what I'm doing now.
mhm.
But he probably can be doing. I think he has the potential to do what I do even without me. So, but he's pretty well rounded. But like at the
Mhm.
same time, he wouldn't have reach that level of technical proficiency if he wasn't a specialist either.
Mhm. Do you think it is important to find like a partner or a teammate when you're starting off in a business, or or find like a like-minded person that you want to pursue the
Yes,
thing with?
I think it's incredibly important for because that builds lifelong bonds, and
Hmm.
those bonds tend to be kind of like the seed of your social network too. And when I say like-minded,
Hmm.
I think it's less so about their opinions on AI or cryptocurrency or the tech field or how to raise money. I think again it goes a lot more to character.
Hmm.
For me, I've really valued people who are honest and open
Hmm.
and are willing to speak what they want to say without being afraid. And I think that's very, very healthy for communication.
Hmm.
Because if it shouldn't ever be a game of what is he thinking, what is his perception, all that sort of stuff. There's just too many things to worry about. That's one less thing I can worry about. That's great.
Hmm.
um, and and again, like I've also met John, who's an advisor on our US side, and he's an extremely talented person. His resume is very impressive. He's the president of this one semiconductor foundry in the US. So again, but he's also a very honest, straight shot person. Um, so and of course maybe there are some things maybe there's some character flaws that I don't like in those people, but the thing is, for me, I value, not saying I do in this case, but there could be in
Hmm.
some other with some of the people I work with, um but I think the most important part of honesty and like openness
Hmm.
was the most important for me. That's what's really and between John and Wade and I, we've we've gone through really great times, we've gone through really bad times, but our relationship never changes, and we're always focused on just doing what we think is most beneficial for the group.
Hmm.
And in a sense, those people introduce us to other people. So through John, I've had the pleasure of meeting Daniel Quintero, who's my lawyer,
Hmm.
um, and his firm, like, they've taken on Samsung at the Supreme Court level and stuff like that. And Daniel recognized that I'm a very, you know honest and open person, and he's introduced me to some amazing other invest incredibly wealthy and talented people in the Bay Area. So again, that, who you choose to stick close to, that's where your social tree, your social roots start to grow.
Hmm.
um so, and I think, and again, I think, it's a character issue, uh not more what I would consider more superficial topics
Hmm.
on actual business and technology.
Hmm. What are your thoughts on like giving back to a community or helping a community?
Yeah, I really believe in it, especially if you have the time and the resources too.
Hmm.
I personally, uh like, I don't think I don't think just donating stuff is enough. Sometimes, sometimes I'll donate. Like, especially after I sold my company, I'll donate to the church, and I'll donate to some of these other nonprofit foundations.
Hmm.
But I really wanted to give back time to a lot of the community on how to raise money, because there's no course, that tells you how to raise money effectively, how to
Yeah.
do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I've recently started to also do help be an advisor at our local high school's entrepreneurship program, and teaching high school kids how to be an entrepreneur,
Mm.
and to learn about these things. So moving into college, they already know, they can kind of already visualize
Yeah.
what their game plan is like and how it will play out. um During my generation, I guess, well, I say generation, but I'm only probably like 10 years off from you or so, but or during my time, that wasn't really something that very common.
Yeah.
Or if it was, you were probably a business major.
Hmm.
It wasn't just something you could walk into a club and just join, until you were basically in college, and in which case I think it's already a little too late.
What is your life motto?
um I think when I said earlier,
Hmm.
with Bruce Lee, he says, be like water.
Like
I
water.
think that's the most important thing.
Hmm.
Um, just being able to uh, improvise and adapt. I think that's just yeah, adapt and improvise. I think that's just the most important thing.
Last question. Is your company public or private? Like, are you
It
privately
is
or
it is
public?
public. We
It's
are we are a
publicly.
subsidiary within a public holding company.
Mhm.
We're on the Nasdaq.
Okay.
It's Alpine Four Holdings, and it's a lot of companies together. I think there's a lot of great synergies. The economy has been pretty tough in general, so some subsidiaries have been doing better than others. We're more R&D related, but I think this year we actually have product going. We were at CES. We just announced our whole product line of battery cells, battery products, all sorts of stuff. So for us, we're now kind of like coming on a horizon,
Mhm.
um, and kind of coming out of our R&D phase and
Mhm.
starting to really grow. So I think we have a lot of potential. And in no way am I trying to give any sort of investment advice or anything. I'm just saying, as a company, I'm very um optimistic about our future
Mhm.
in general, at least specifically to our subsidiaries,
Uh,
in our company, in our relationship with Alpine 4.
mhm. All right, one more question.
Sure.
What value like do you value in a person?
And again, I think it's honesty and integrity.
Honestly. Okay.
Somebody who will tell you, who's not afraid to tell you the truth, and
Hmm.
also somebody who is not cutting corners. I think that's a very big deal.
Okay.
I know and I know people always think that people in China tend to be tend to be the opposite, but it happens a lot in the US too.
Yeah.
If it's somebody that's cutting corners, being sloppy, that just tends to not be a person you want to work with. At home, I'm sloppy, so I'll leave a lot of dishes and laundry out in the house, and my wife will get mad at me. But um, for at least for business, when there's other people's livelihood on the line, especially, I always make sure to look for people who are doing things by the book
Hmm.
and not cutting corners. So a lot of times we could have cut corners, we could have made extra money.
Hmm.
I just or we could have taken advantage of people, but I personally would never want to do that
Hmm.
because even though there's a short term gain, people start to wise up. And also,
Yeah.
as a long term thing, people recognize that personality trait. And again, they'll introduce you to other people who are like minded too.
Yeah.
And again, growing that social tree from a healthy root, I think is
Hmm.
a most important thing because then it dictates who you're surrounded with.
Hmm.
You don't want to be surrounded with scumbags because
Yeah.
they will leave you the moment things go sour.
Hmm.
And it's very rare to find, I guess, the people that I've been so fortunate to work with too, because you see in a lot of these companies, once they raise their first series and like start getting really well, they start getting a little bigger, then there starts to be a lot of internal conflict and they start to fall out.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, so again, that kind of goes back to if you have people with these kind of characteristics,
Hmm.
at least you're able to talk about because you're able to identify those issues early on.
Hmm.
Um, and at least those people, if they do end up leaving, it's not going to be on a sour note. They're not going to just drop everything they have and leave.
Hmm.
It's at least those people will leave you in good hands or in good
Hmm.
shape.
All right. Thank you. I wonder if you could give me like a website link to your company.
Sure. We're doing a lot. So we have electjet.com, and that's where we sell our consumer level products.
Hmm.
We're also starting to sell products to our RCA brand. And then of course there's also information on us through alpine4.com.
Okay.
So there's a kind of a multitude of things. I know it gets a little confusing. Electjet was our company when we sold into Alpine, and
Uh-huh.
we still use the brand for consumer level products. But I think from especially for the solid state batteries, we're going to really be utilizing the RCA name. Have you
Hmm.
heard of RCA before?
No.
So it used to be one of the biggest electronics brands in the US, but that was like 30 years ago. So I didn't recognize it at first, but my mom recognized it. She's like, "Oh, I've seen their ads on the TV all the time when she was a kid." Um, so they're a much bigger brand, much more well-known brand. And we'll be working through that brand, specifically through our battery products. So we'll be leading the charge for the battery products there.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Samuel. I really learned a lot from you today. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
no
your time.
problem.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks so
Have a
much,
good,
Sam.
no problem. Have a good night.
Good night.